the traditional owners of the land on which I am speaking today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and I acknowledge the sovereignty and the ongoing custodianship of the First Nation peoples of this country. I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and this always and will always will be Aboriginal land. So thank you so much, Ibu Sri, Dr. Sri Wiyanti, Eddyono from the Faculty of Law, Gadjah Mada University, Ibu Rena Herdiyani from the Kalyana Mitra Women's Organization, and also my colleague from the Thomas More Law School, Perla Guarneros. We are very privileged to be able to have the time to sit and listen and then think about what Australia and Indonesia have achieved in terms of promoting an end to discriminations against women. The topic that we are going to cover today is quite broad, of course, but I think there is going to be the next step after this. This is just the beginning of our collaboration between the two law schools, and we look forward to having more engagement, not only with students but also with organizations like Kalyana Mitra, and this is not going to happen without the hard work, and therefore I would like to really appreciate the hard work of Ibu Dr. Sri Wiyanti Eddyono and her teams, Mas Ruchi as well. And I cannot name everyone who has been helping us to make this international webinar taking place. So without further ado, I would like to give Ibu Dr. Sri Wiyanti your time to present and also to share with us your thoughts, your experience in working within the areas of implementing CEDAW and Indonesia's role in position on CEDAW, and what progress and what limitations or challenges that Indonesia is facing in as a state party to CEDAW. Time is yours, Ibu Dr. Sri Wiyanti. I hope that you can, I know there are a lot of things that you can say, but 10 minutes for you at the moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bu Dina. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Budaya, and then salam rahayu, and semuanya dalam keadaan sehat, and good morning and good afternoon. So today, I will share more basic informations about Indonesia's position on CEDAW. So let me use my PPT for having this presentation. So it is make easy for me to manage my time. Just a minute. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So perhaps everybody already knows that Indonesia has ratified CEDAW since in 1984. We have ratified through the law number 1984. And then you know that whenever the state has already ratified the convention, particularly human rights conventions, so that the state has obligations to implement the convention. So it is also applied to Indonesia because Indonesia has ratified CEDAW. Indonesia has consequence to implement the right recognized by CEDAW and other obligations, particularly to report the implementations of CEDAW. However, in Indonesia, CEDAW is not only become a guidelines for the governments to implement women's human rights, but it is also very essential for women's activists and academics, because in many activism movement in Indonesia, usually they utilize CEDAW as a legal grounds in advocacy women's rights in Indonesia. For example, we have very genuinely used the concept of discriminations, and then it's development, particularly the concept of gender-based violence. Whenever we do advocacy for gender, especially last advocacy for the law on the sexual violence, for example. We also utilize CEDAW in order to encourage governments to eradicate cultural barriers that usually hamper women's access to their rights. And then I think one of the concept and CEDAW that's a very important is to not make it quite distinguish between a public and private arena, which we think that women's human right is also the public issues. It's not only a private issues. And then we in Indonesia, women's movement, academicians and activists usually utilize the affirmative actions concept very broadly in order to ask the government to protect women's right in certain kind of aspect. So, and then again, whenever we discuss about CEDAW, we talk about state obligations. So this is a very important aspect. That is why CEDAW as a framework is very important, not only for the government, but also civil society and academicians in Indonesia. So as we know that CEDAW has internal mechanism that called as a monitoring mechanism, which the committee of CEDAW usually will monitor the state parties, how they implement their obligations with regard to women's rights. So every state party, including Indonesia, has to submit reports every year, every 4 years. And then I think there are some problems with regard to the reporting process because not every state, every country follows the obligations, yeah, that including Indonesia actually, yeah. Since 1984, Indonesia had submit only 5 times reports, yeah, to conclude for 8 circle report. For what I mean that Indonesian's government sometimes not fully submitted every 4 years. Sometimes they submit in 8 years, but they make a joint report, yeah, for the period 1, for period 2 and 3, 4 and 5, and 6 and 7, for example. So that's kind of like only 5 times Indonesia submit report to the CEDAW. So usually, if Indonesian's government provide report to the CEDAW committee will provide a comment to Indonesian report. So they put it a list of issues that the governments need to respond to the comments of the committee. And then the committee usually use a different kind of sources whenever they want to evaluate the Indonesian's report. One of the very important of the sources is the NGO's report to committee CEDAW. So usually we call it as CEDAW report. So what is NGO's report for CEDAWs? I think, and then what is the positions of NGO's report for CEDAWs? I think the NGO's report for CEDAWs actually present the participations, yeah, of civil society to monitor the state obligations, particularly to fulfill the women's rights recognition in CEDAW conventions. I think what is the rights? There are many rights recognized in the CEDAW. For example, right to access to justice, right to health, right to education, and so on, that related to non-discrimination, so that women can better access their right, equal with other human rights. Yeah. So the participation of civil society to monitor the governments actually is not only it's beyond, yeah, I think it's beyond the monitoring mechanism. It's actually become part of the advocacy of NGOs, to raise specific issues in the international level. For example, in the last report, the NGOs has already campaigns on, for example, the marriage, child marriage, female genital mutilation, anti-sexual violence issues. So that's actually become the space for the NGOs to raise the issue in international level, so that the government will kind of like think that it is important for them to follow up in local level. So the interesting situation is in Indonesia that participation has increased from time to time. I think we can see it from 2021. There were about 31 shadow reports, which 30 from NGOs or NGOs network, and then one from National Commission on Violence Against Women. It is increased compared to in 2012. The report come from the government, and there were about 5 shadow reports from 5 NGOs and network, and one National Commission on Violence Against Women. So I want to conclude. I still have time. If I have time, I will continue, but if not, I will stop. So the active role of NGOs, I think it presents the dynamic of relations between NGOs and governments. They're not only in monitoring the implementation CEDAW, but also as part of advocacy run by the NGOs. I think women's NGOs in Indonesia, particularly for those who wants to advocacy for gender equality right in Indonesia, they are working very hard in a national level to have legal recognition and legal protection, and they utilize international network, for example, like a shadow report mechanism, to do like a lobby and consultation, and actually to raise the issues. So this is advocacy of legal reform done by the NGOs. They do study, they do mobilization based on concept of their finding. They do lobby to lawmakers, they negotiation, and they do also public awareness and mobilizations to push a new law. And one of the strategy actually by using a shadow report. So there are the laws that has been established through the continuous, genuinely, and comprehensive advocacy. Yeah, I think one of it is anti-sexual violence, and the health policy on female genital mutilation, the amendments of the new law on marriage to increase the age of marriage for women. So there are, and then the right of disabilities, the right of the women's migrant worker, and so on. I think what I want to say, shadow report is not only as part of the monitoring mechanism done by the NGOs, yeah, in collaboration with the government, but it is beyond the monitoring part. So that's what I want to say. Thank you, Dina.
Thank you so much, Mbak Iyi, Dr. Sri Wiyanti Eddyono, for your presentation. And you made it like 10 minutes, so well done. There are a couple of nice, very important element that you raised in your presentation, but I don't want to talk about it at the moment, but I have invited everyone to ask a question to the speaker. You can later open your microphone, or you can also write your question in here in the chat box. So we are going to listen to our second and third speakers, and then after that we will be having our Q&A opportunity for everyone to raise their questions and also concerns or criticisms as well. This is a safe space for everyone to share your concern about things related to the topic that we are discussing in this international webinar. So without further ado, I would like to now invite, let's hear the experience of Australia. We have heard from our first speaker about how Indonesia have been participating in CEDAW report and the roles of NGOs and how they works with the government as well. So now let's hear from our speaker, Dr. Perla Guarneros from the Thomas More Law School to share her research on this particular topic.
Thank you so much. I am going to thank you. I would like to also acknowledge that I am meeting you from the unceded land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. These are the Aboriginal peoples who are the traditional owners of the land in Australia. And we understand that there was an invasion and land was never ceded. So we are sitting in their land. I'm going to try to share my screen. I'm not always really good at this. Just bear with me, please. Oh, you're seeing my email, and that's not what I want you to see. Let me just.
No, actually, it's good already, Perla.
Oh, was it good?
Yeah.
All right. I was seeing my email, and I was like, no, you don't want to read my emails. Okay, just give me a second. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to start very similar to what Dr. Shrey was saying earlier. I'm going to present the process. I'm offering here more a bit of more of a visual understanding of the process, how the process has evolved when it comes to the connection between countries and the CEDAW and their committee, and how it has changed the dynamics with Australia. So Australia and CEDAW, Australia ratified CEDAW in 1983, and it signed its optional protocol in 2009. So that was a straight relationship between Australia and the CEDAW. Australia is a dualist country. So for those ones who don't know this, there are, when it comes to the reception of international law, there are two lines. It could be monist countries. Those countries are the ones that at the moment they sign and ratify an international agreement, that immediately becomes the law, mandatory primary law in their territory. That is the case of my home state, Mexico. It's a monist country. So if there is a ratification of an international agreement, that is law under Mexican territory. That's not the way in Australia. Australia is a dualist country.
Perla, sorry to interrupt. Can you please be a little bit slower?
Yes.
Because we have our colleague sign language interpreter, so that
Absolutely.
we can make sure they can follow.
Absolutely. And a dualist country, Australia is a dualist country. That means that they follow a two-step approach to the reception of international law. So if the agreements are signed and ratified, that does not mean that they are immediately adopted within Australian territory. That means that laws need to be created for that to become legally binding in Australia. When the CEDAW was signed and ratified by Australia, the Sex Discrimination Act was enacted. The act gives effect to many of the obligations under CEDAW, but that is it doesn't really cover for all of the contents in CEDAW or all of the protections. The problem in Australia is that there is no single law that consolidates all women rights outlined in CEDAW into one document. There have been other acts, federal acts in place, like the Fair Work Act or the Workplace Gender Equality Act, but still, it's all scattered, and it doesn't fully, like, there's no one piece of legislation that acknowledges CEDAW and all of the rights that it grants there. Let's talk about the process. So the CEDAW reports in Australia, Australia has been part of 8 reporting cycles, and within those 8 reporting cycles, it has submitted 10 reports. Just like Dr. Sri was mentioning before, they're meant to be every 3 to 4 years, but that's not always the case. It could be because countries are going through circumstances like, civil war or things like that, or just because it's a lot of work and they can't keep up with the reporting before the UN. Half of those reports follow the usual process, with state parties submitting a report to CEDAW and CEDAW issuing concluding observations. But then in 2010, the reporting cycle between Australia's reporting cycle, CEDAW received shadow reports from civil society organizations. Dr. Shreyov also talked about shadow reporting, but these were done after the state had issued its report. From 2014, CEDAW has introduced this new mechanism called the recessional working groups, and that allows NGOs to issue their reports before the state. So let me just give you a more visual understanding of this. So there is the report. Originally, this is the original process. We had there a beautiful report signed by Australia, and Australia would submit it to CEDAW. CEDAW would scrutinize it, read it, and then offer concluding observations. That was the original process, pretty straightforward. In 2010, it was Australia preparing its report, submitting it to CEDAW, but also NGOs were allowed to submit shadow reports. That is, NGOs would also say, I think this is what's going on. Please consider both. Consider the report of the state, but also consider what we are telling you. That is when the scrutiny would start, and CEDAW would issue a list of issues. And that list of issues was submitted to the country, to the state. State would respond, and that is when the concluding observations were issued by CEDAW. It was in 2014 when the pre-sessional working groups were established. So all of this process wasn't really followed anymore, or it changed. So now, before anything happens, before it is reporting time, NGOs and a CEDAW, a pre-sessional working group of the CEDAW committee, they talk. So NGOs have the opportunity to submit their report saying, before the state tells you anything, let me tell you that A, B, and C is happening. CEDAW receives, this pre-sessional working group receives all of these reports, and then there is a meeting, that meeting from the group where NGOs can go and restate their written submissions. So now the process is, there is NGOs who should issue shadow reports in the pre-sessional working group session, and then CEDAW drafts a list of issues prior reporting, that is before the state reports. So that it's given to the state, and then the state can draft its report. Same thing, the state submits it to CEDAW. But even after the state has submitted their report to CEDAW, NGOs can still submit shadow reports. Then there is the scrutiny, and then the concluding observations. So what used to be just a relationship between a country and the committee of CEDAW now also includes NGOs. What happened in Australia, what has been happening in Australia is we have some solid intervention of NGOs, participation of NGOs after the report has been submitted. But when it comes to those pre-sessional working groups before the state submits, in 2017, there were only 2 civil society submissions. And then in 2023, there were 3 submissions. But one of those submissions was from the Thomas More Law School. So we were representing civil society, but we're not really an NGO organized for that purpose. That led to a publication from my colleague, Dr. Sevda Clark, who is also a an academic at the Thomas More Law School, about wondering what happened. So in this publication in the Alternative Law Journal, we explain our experience and how surprised we were to find that there were only three civil society organizations being part of that pre-sessional working group process. And when it came to the oral intervention, it was only us. And it was very shocking because after us, we had countries like Trinidad and Tobago or Argentina, and they had dozens of NGOs speaking up for their countries. For Australia, it was just us, and we're not even an NGO. So we started with a question. What are the reasons that prevent NGOs from participating in CEDAW proceedings? And this is an ongoing research that we are carrying out at the Thomas More Law School. We have surveyed some dozens of NGOs, and the answers go from they don't have the financial resources or dedicated staff for that purpose, or they don't know about the proceedings because the pre-sessional working group, yes, it's been in place for 10 years, but reporting periods, because they can extend, it might have been that it has only gone through a reporting period once in a country. But they also said things very interesting, like participating before the United Nations is intimidating. Also, other NGOs mentioned, well, we represent migrants, so we don't really have the academic skills or the language to submit a report in English to the United Nations, or they don't see the relevance in participating in international fora. This is what you see on the slide is the research question that we are exploring, and that it's leading to another paper that we are going to publish this year, but also to create that connection with NGOs. Or the aims of our research is to strengthen NGO participation in UN proceedings, understanding that NGOs have a really strong power to change history. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Perla Guarneros, for sharing with us generously about your research and also your key findings. And then, of course, I think everyone would like to hear more with the answers from your research questions. And I guess probably, I don't know, maybe to some of us here, especially colleagues in Indonesia, that's probably quite a news, that knowing that Australia compared to Indonesia has submitted less report, and then that the NGO participation is not that rigorous. I can see Dr. Sri was like doing some gestures while listening to the presentation of Dr. Perla. That's why we are very grateful to have Ibu Rena Herdiyani, who is going to exactly share with us what are the practices in terms of how NGOs contribute to Indonesia's reporting obligation to CEDAW. And also, perhaps we will also listen to the challenges, or the way NGOs in Indonesia work with Indonesian government to make sure that Indonesia's obligation to end discrimination against women can be achieved. Ibu Rena, similar with two other speakers, I will give you 10 minutes to share with us your experience and also your knowledge. Thank you, Ibu Rena.
Thank you, Mbak Dina. So let me share the presentation. So I would like to share the experience of CEDAW Working Group Indonesia as network in Indonesia. that has 3 times to submit the shadow report to CEDAW committee. So I would like to introduce CEDAW Working Group Indonesia. It's the network established in 2006. Actually, why this network established and initiated by 10 women's rights organizations? Because at that time, we know that CEDAW is very comprehensive international bill of women's rights that regulate a lot of women's rights. And we see there is opportunity in the next year in 2007, because that year, our government, Indonesian government, will have a constructive dialogue with CEDAW committee. So we see this is a very good time for us to submit a shadow report, because before 2007, so this is the first report that CWGI submitted to CEDAW committee. So before that, it's already a long time ago. The Indonesian NGO submit a report to CEDAW committee. So in 2007, so we start again to make a shadow report and then submit again to CEDAW committee. And then we have some program strategies, socialization of CEDAW, and also capacity building to CSO, because not many women's organizations and also CSOs in Indonesia, they understand how to use this mechanism and how to make a report to CEDAW committee. So that's why maybe we think there is more and more NGOs in Indonesia submit report to CEDAW committee, because they know, maybe some of them also they join capacity building of CWGI about CEDAW, and then how they can report to CEDAW committee, because we submit report as a network, but the organizations like disability women with disability organizations, they decided to send their own report to CEDAW committee as organization. So we support them, we assist them to know more about CEDAW and then to write shadow report. So that's why we encourage another women's organization also to submit a report with specific issues, because we have word limitation if we submit as a network. So that's why we encourage organization with specific issues also to send their own report. We also monitoring the CEDAW implementation. We have indicators based on articles in CEDAW, especially articles on women's rights, that can be used to monitor regularly about the CEDAW implementation and also reporting. And the members of CWGI now about 25 women's rights organization and also CSO, civil society organization, and the secretariat of CWGS is in Kalyana Mitra. And this is the CEDAW's advocacy strategy that we have done, monitoring and data collection. So we do it not only when we want to make a report, so we do it regularly. So in 1 year, so we have a meeting and then try to highlight some important issues or emerging women's issues that happen in 1 year. So we note, and then we will take a note about the emerging issues at this year. And then when we want to write the next report, we will include. And then also Mbak Yi and also from the Australia also talking about the list of issues and questions from the CEDAW committee to the governments. We also respond to the CEDAW committee list of issues and questions to the Indonesian government, because this list of issues and questions, it's provided by the CEDAW committee to Indonesian government before the constructive dialogue or before the session. And the government usually they not engage us as NGO to respond this list of issues and questions. So that's why we make by our own self, yeah, not have a meeting with the Indonesian government because they don't give information about their response. And even for their report, the state report, sometimes they not invite us in the process. And then it's very difficult to get their report, the state report. Usually we should ask to the contact person in the ministry to get the report. So that's happened in Indonesia. And then also writing NGO report on the CEDAW implementations because we are a network. So we try to engage more NGOs, not only based in Jakarta, but also outside Jakarta because Indonesia is very huge. So we try to engage more local NGOs from another provinces. And then we have opportunity also to monitoring of the constructive dialogue between CEDAW committee and Indonesian government. And at that time, it's very important for NGOs to engage directly with CEDAW committee because we can lobby the CEDAW committee members through informal public meeting with NGO because before the session with the government, there is specific session for NGO to talk, to give our statement to the CEDAW committee. But decision is not only for Indonesia. There are another CSOs or network from another countries. They also attend the meeting. So per country, we only have 10 minutes to give our oral statement. And then we have also opportunity to have a private lunchtime briefing with the CEDAW committee before the session, before the dialogue with the state with the government. At that time, the CEDAW committee usually asked some questions to NGOs, and then we also can propose some list of questions from NGOs that very important, and we ask the CEDAW committee to ask the list of questions to our government during the dialogue. And of course, the media advocacy is very important. Usually we do it before the dialogue and then after. So after the publication or the issue of concluding observation from the CEDAW committee. So usually we have like press conference. And then of course, after the concluding observations from CEDAW committee issued or published by the CEDAW committee, so it's time for us to continue our advocacy at the national level because it's nothing if we only doing the advocacy at international level. So the strong strategy need to be done at the national level because sometimes the government they forget the recommendations or homework in the concluding observations after they go back home in Indonesia. So CEDAW is a lot of government or ministry discuss about CEDAW when they want to make a report, and then after that they forget. So that's why it's very important for NGOs to remind the related ministry or government institution to implement the recommendation in concluded observation. So usually CWGI comes one by one to the Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection, and then Ministry of Human Rights, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we bring the concluding observation and we translate into Bahasa Indonesia. And sometimes they don't know there is concluding observation for the government. And even they don't know also about CEDAW sometimes. And then this is types of NGO reports, shadow report. This is a report written to criticize government report. We can also make an alternative report, the report written separately and independently from the government report. And then another one is complementary report. This is complementary report to the report submitted by the government. So the complementary reports, it means that if there is an issue that not highlighted in the government report, so this report will be raise the issues which not included in the government report. And then not only NGOs that can submit the report to CEDAW committee, so national human rights institution like Komnas Perempuan and also Komnas HAM, National Human Rights Commission, also can submit the report, their report. And also UN agencies like UNFPA or UN Women in Indonesia, or at the regional level, they can also submit the report, but not publish the report, yeah, from the UN agencies. So actually for the Indonesian government report, they already submitted 5 report, yeah, the initial report 1986, and then you can see they don't submit the report on time because it should be every 4 years, but they make it like every 8 years. And then the last report in 2019, so this is the 8th report. And then we have the dialogue, constructive dialogue or the CEDAW session in 2020. This is during COVID pandemic, and then the constructive dialogue held by online, yeah. And then we also have a space to talk directly to CEDAW committee by online. This is CWGI report. We already submitted 3 times, 2007, 2012, and then 2020. And this is the process, how we make the report, very long process. And we engage also like critical readers to read again the report and then give some input. And then after that, there is revision. And then we also have a validation workshop to share our data, and then our friends or our colleagues from another CSO also can give feedback for the draft, yeah, for the report. So this is some issues covered in the last report of CWGI: gender-based violence, women's participation in politics, citizenship, employment, health, rural women, marriage and family relation, women and conflict, women human rights defenders, women in media, information and technology. So we decide the issues that we want to raise in our report based on agreement. So this is very challenging for us because sometimes the other NGO said that our issue is very important. Why you not include it in the report? So that's why we should make a concise report, because there is a word limitation. And then this is because our government should submit the report, the next report, this year, November 2025. So CWGI now on progress in making the shadow report or independent report. So this is some issues that we want to write in the report: women, politics and democracy, sexual and reproductive health, gender-based violence, women's and employment, women's peace and security, rural women, women and media, information and technology, marriage and family relations, women, environment and climate crisis, and women in education. So this is some issues that we want to write in the next report. And then actually, there are some issues that always highlight by CEDAW committee in their concluding observation, like the revision of the marriage law. So in every concluding observation, the issues are always raised by the CEDAW committee. We are sure that the committee will ask again in the next session, yeah, to the government, because we think there is no progress here in Indonesia about there is no effort to revise some articles which is very discriminatory articles, and then need to be revised. And then about the bill on the protection of domestic worker protection is also always highlighted in the two concluding observation. So that's why it's very important to remind our government, the Indonesian government, if the issues always highlighted by the CEDAW committee, it means it's very priority issues. If because CEDAW, the CEDAW committee cannot give like legal sanction to the governments who don't have a progress or they don't implement the concrete observations, they don't have legal sanction. But there is a like moral sanction. Maybe Mbak Iyi also can explain about that. The moral sanction from the CEDAW committee and also another country, because during the constructive dialogue, the representatives from another countries can also observe, can also become observer, and then it's open the process. So we can watch the process in, I think, in website, TV, television website of UN. So it means that every people see how the accountability of the Indonesian government to implement the CEDAW Convention, and then how our government, Indonesian government, answer all the questions by the CEDAW committee, which very many questions from the CEDAW committee, and sometimes the government representative, they cannot answer all because in fact there is also the challenge in Indonesia. The ministries, another ministry still consider the leading sector of the implementation of CEDAW is only a Ministry of Women Empowerment. So the other ministries say so it is your responsibility, not us. So and in the dialogue, sometimes another ministry, they don't know how to answer the question from the CEDAW committee. So that's all the my presentation, and then we can continue with the discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mbak Rena, for your very informative, insightful. I guess this is live experience. You are sharing with us your experience in working as part of the CWGI, and also I think for everyone in here, I don't know, probably all the information that has been shared here by Dr. Sri Wiyanti, Dr. Perla, and then also Ibu Rena, you probably won't get it on ChatGPT. Trust me, right? So it's very important, and I'm glad that this is recorded. So everyone who is probably doing something else while listening to this webinar can listen again to the recording, because trust me, again, if you are a students from at the law faculty, this is all a very important stuff. And yeah, so I actually have some question, but I would like to first allow our participants here to raise your hand, open your mic. You can ask question to all the three speakers. I'm happy to, I trust everyone can speak English, but also if you don't speak English, I'm happy to help with that. And Perla is, actually Dr. Perla is learning Bahasa Indonesia as well, so don't worry about language barriers. Yeah, uh, yeah, Arimbi, okay, we have already Mbak Arimbi. Over to you, Mbak Arimi.
Thanks to Mbak Dina and all the speakers for presenting very interesting topic in this morning. I am Arimbi Fajari from Research Center for Law, Gender and Society, and I'm sorry because I cannot open my camera to the technical difficulties. And I have three questions to Bu Sri Wiyanti, and the same question to Bu Sri Wiyanti and Bu Perla. It's about what is the significant differences to the quality of report submitted to the CEDAW committee before and after the NGOs given the opportunity to sending the shadow report in the context of Indonesia and Australia, and also to Bu Rena about the experience during the process of writing and submitting shadow report to the CEDAW committee. Is there any kind of intervention made by the government to influence the substance of the report, and also how NGOs manage it if it is already done like that, Bu Dina? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mbak Rimbi. That's all very good question. Excellent question. Okay. I think we just do it one by one. Yeah, Ibu Dr. Sri. So I will now let all the speakers to address Mbak Arimbi's question. Over to you. Probably we can start with Dr. Sri.
Yes, thank you for your question. I think your question become a good research paper question on it, to be honest, because it will have, I don't know, maybe Rena will answer more about it, but in my experience, a long time ago, international advocacy is very important in supporting the national advocacy for legal reform and then legal policy reform of policy development in Indonesia. I think before there were, I think I came at Mbak Rena, I was before 2006, yeah. Just before that, yeah. And then after that, of course, the government usually provide a very formal report, right? So they evaluate their implementations through the usually very formal saying that, okay, we have established the law, we have established the policy, we have established the system. So usually this is the government's language. When they put a report into the CEDAW, everything seems very good, okay? But we know that there are obstacles in the way how they implement the operations, yeah? Usually the government did not put the obstacles, did not put the critical situations in the report, okay? So I think when the first hands the government submitted to the committee, and then the NGOs notice about it because it is published. Yeah, I think you are the students. Some of you are actually taking a course on human rights law. I think we already discussed about how to access the government report, right? So we can see the report, and then based on that, I think Mbak Rena has already mentioned about they make the NGOs usually give a shadow or give a NGOs report to raise or to criticize or to give comments about the Indonesian. Based on that, usually the Indonesians will give a comment, right, based on list of issues. So these comments of the government then usually will try to respond the questions come from the committee CEDAW. I think Mbak Rena has very interestingly say that even the questions or the list of issues come from the committee, usually also given as a feedback from the NGOs to committee, right? So this is kind of like interactions, dialogues, and discussions, lobbyings around the mechanisms so that usually the governments of Indonesia then give some informations. And I think the more important is not before and after, but more important is the concluding comment from the committee. So usually based on the discussion, based on the different kind of information, so that the committee will provide concluding comment. This concluding comment is very critical. They will give the informations about, they'll give their evaluations, the progress that have been done by the Indonesian government to implement CEDAW, but they also give some feedback about what need the government need to overcome and change or revise in the future in order to implement CEDAW. I think what I find out, the concluding comments become very important document. Thank you.
Yeah, Perla, do you want to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more with Dr. Sri. The thing is, just when you put it in very simple terms, if you only have one person telling you how things are going on, you have nothing to compare with. And we were talking here about governments who are not really on the ground checking on every single women's issue. That just can't be. All right, because we have issues like domestic violence and gender mutilation, etc. So that is not something that the government like it's keeping like they're not as organized to keep a record of every single thing and say this is what we've been doing to support this or to help with this. So at the time of reporting, governments just put together a list of things that they have done, a list that looks good, at least that we would say the expression of gets them off the hook. Like we've been doing some work, and sometimes they are doing work, but that doesn't like it's never enough. Unfortunately, it's never enough. So the fact that the civil society organizations had that opportunity to bring in their input was really important. But now, since 2014, and this pre-sessional working group process has been really, really good because it's not let's wait to see what the government says, is let's set up the agenda. So for the government to issue a report, there must have been a pre-sessional working group where this by the way are closed doors meetings. So NGOs feel comfortable sharing information and saying, this is all what's going on. Could you please ask the government what have they been doing about A, B, and C? So governments are now responding. They are not just presenting a list of things they've been doing. They are responding to a list of issues prior reporting that the CEDAW committee collates from everything, all of the input that the NGOs provided. The thing with this process is that it's not very well known. That's what we've been finding in our research. In the case of Indonesia, it has been just one cycle that has been in place that the process was working. And then Rena said, well, there is the upcoming cycle, and that is actually a question that I'm just gonna throw in now and see if Rena can add it to her answer. Is there awareness in Indonesia about the pre-sessional working group process? Is there a scheduled pre-sessional working group meeting for this year's for the upcoming cycle? Because if it is a really good opportunity to set the agenda, to say this is what I think you should be asking the government receives that information, and then it's not just whatever they want to report. They have to address those issues. So the impact in summing up to answer your question has been massive and really positive, but there's always more that can be done.
Awesome. Okay, Mbak Rena?
Yes, so I would like to add what Mbak Iyi said, that usually the report of the government is always very good. So they always talking about they already issued or ratified some laws or policies. like domestic violence law, but they don't inform about the implementations. There is a lot of barriers. There is a lot of problems on the ground. So the victim of domestic violence still very have limited access to the center, the center that they can report their case, and also the budget allocation also very minimum. So it's very difficult to implement the law. So we are sure that the government, the Indonesian government, in the next report, they will say that we already have the new law on the sexual violence, law on sexual violence crime. That's it. So they don't want to report. There is still barriers. There is still problems on the grounds. So there is still a lot of victims of sexual violence who cannot report to the police because they live in the very far in the island, or how the indigenous women can access to justice if there is no like education or raising awareness about this law, and there is no mechanism at the local area until village level, so they cannot access. So when we're talking about CEDAW, we don't only talking about the policies on the paper, the law on the paper, but how the implementation, how the women also can get the benefit from the law implementation or from the program of the government, how the women also can access to the justice, yeah. For instance, like law on sexual violence crime. So how the victim can report and get justice, can access justice from the police, because we still a lot of problem on the perspective of the police, of the legal enforcer. They're still blaming the victim. So there's a lot of problems. So that's why it's very important NGOs report to complement information that not highlighted by the government, because the CEDAW committee is not in Indonesia, so they don't know what happened on the ground. And also it's very important information from Ibu Perla. We will try to utilize the mechanism, the precisional working group, because usually we only submit the report to CEDAW committee and then only answer the list of issues, but not try to submit a report, yeah, like maybe summary report for the precisional working group. So we will try to access that mechanism. And then about the intervention from the government on the substance of the NGO report. So there is no intervention from the government in Indonesia. So we have our own process, and then after the report final, so usually we will have meeting with the minister, and we will give the report to them. Not like the government, they don't invite us and then talk about the report. And then very difficult to access the report of the government. So for CWGI, after we finalize the report, we come to the minister and then have a dialogue and then give our report to them. So it's very transparent from our side, yeah, from the NGOs. So actually, the government should make the report very transparent and public can access the report. But in fact, before the dialogue, before they submit the report, we cannot access the report at all. So we should get from the insider. But there is no intervention from the government during the writing process of the report.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the three speakers. I would like to invite one more opportunity for colleagues here. If you have any question, I know you probably have a lot of things on your head at the moment, because there are so many information. I mean, for me, there are so many new information, not just from the context in Australia, but also in Indonesia. And of course, I understand the complexity of building a report, yeah, Mbak Rena, given that the diversity in Indonesia and also in terms of geography and also different cultural, social differences. And in fact, one of the uh, principles in CEDAW is to eradicate, like you said, Mbak Iyik, in your slide, how CEDAW should help eradicate socio-cultural values that continuously used by groups to undermine women's rights. And in fact, in Australia, talking about Australia, I just look at the of the statistic. In fact, 14% of people aged 18 years and over have experienced sexual violence since the age of 15. This is in Australia. And so in that context, with what Perla said in her presentation, that there has been very limited opportunities, and also because of limited resources, that NGOs haven't really uh, participated in pushing for the government, and also in submitting a report to the UN. I hope I'm correct, Perla, by saying that. Uh, Okay, if there is no more question, if there are any other questions, actually I have one question for Ibu Rena, if I may. Um, Although I don't know where it is that I am writing, but I think it relates to the government intervention thing as well. Uh, yeah, I know. With the complexity and the geography, what is the I don't know, you have explained this in your presentation, but what is the hardest thing for you as a as as the body to make sure that you know all those voices and concerns and experience of women, like you said, women from the indigenous group, are recorded and included in your report. So probably just tell us a little bit about what you've done, and also probably NGOs have done in making sure that I understand from what you said in regards to people with disability, they submitted their own report, right? So I'm just, wondering about, women's in the indigenous group. Thank you. And also we have Perla raise her hand. Do you want to ask your question now, Perla?
I can wait.
Maybe you just ask now, Dr.
Okay,
Perla.
so but my question is, I might be wrong. As far as I'm aware, Indonesia has this sort of mixed reception of international law. So it is neither monist, neither dualist. But how does that work? What is the academic and perhaps the legal perception of the commitment to CEDAW? So is it actually perceived by the government like, yes, we are legally bound by it? Or it's like, well, that's just something we signed and we tried to do it, but we're not legally bound. How does that work in Indonesia?
Yeah, Ibu Rena?
Yes, Mbak Dina. So how to ensure that the marginalized groups like indigenous women also engage with the process of the report, of the report writing. So we lobby one by one the organizations, and we will make sure that each issue like disability organization, and then women with HIV/AIDS organizations, and also organization who has concern with the sexual workers, and then the organization who concerned with the the issue of safe abortions. So we try to lobby one by one to engage them in the process, because we know it's very important time for NGOs to write the situation on the ground and then send to and submit to the CEDAW committee. And then we also invite the organization with the who working with indigenous women. We have Perempuan Aman in Indonesia. We already engaged them in the process, and then also highlighted the issues. And then that's why in the last concluding observations, the committee raised the issue of indigenous women very strong. So the government should ratify the protection of the indigenous people rights. So it's come from our report. But for making their own report for the indigenous women's organizations, maybe it's a little bit difficult because they need more assistance from us. So that's why maybe in the next report, maybe we try to encourage them to make their own report, so they will have a more comprehensive report and specific issues. So that's how we also. And then we have also problem. We have limited budget to invite them to have a face-to-face meeting with the local organization. So we use the online platform for focus group discussions for each issue. So before we writing the report, so there is focus group discussion per issue or per theme. And then we invite the representative from the local NGOs to give also to contribute the data or information in the FGD. And then for the Ibu Perla, about maybe Mbak Yi also can add the government and then the legislative. There a lot of them, they don't know about CEDAW, and they always think the law on the ratification of CEDAW, it cannot be implemented. So that's why, so that's its own ratification law. So we cannot implement the law. And then they don't use the law, the law on ratification of CEDAW as the consideration when they will make a law. So we should remind the legislator. So you don't forget to include CEDAW, because this is very important as the legal consideration before they are writing the substance. And then they don't know not only CEDAW, actually the legally binding documents, the CEDAW committee, they have not only concluding observations of CEDAW for each government, but they have general recommendation of CEDAW. So the CEDAW committee, they already produced or published about 39 general recommendation on CEDAW, which have more women's issues. They have comprehensive women's issues. So the women's issues which not included in the CEDAW, so they will make or explain more in the general recommendation. So the government and the legislative, they don't know. The general recommendation also is a legally binding document. So it's one package, CEDAW, concluding observation, and then general recommendation of CEDAW. That's all.
Thank you so much, Ibu Rena. Ibu Sri, do you want to add?
Yes, thank you. I think Perla questions about what is the position of Indonesia, whether it is dualism or monism, monism and dualism. I think there are a debate about it in Indonesia. Some say that it is monism, meaning that whenever you ratify the conventions, state ratify the convention, it has to be implemented in Indonesia. So it's part of domestic law. But some say that it is dualism, like Rena has mentioned before. Some governments say that if it is only ratifications of the convention, it is not directly can be implemented. So that's why we are in the between. That is why I think what I want to say in Indonesia context is quite interesting, because CEDAW is more utilized by NGOs to push the governments to do legal reform, to do institutional reform. So the NGOs are very active to promote CEDAW so that the governments understand about it. So that's interesting, right? It's supposed to be the governments who promote CEDAW to the society, but this is the other way around. So
Absolutely.
as Rena said, they sometimes they don't know what exactly state in CEDAW. I have my experiences in collaboration with the governments, for example, to establish kind of like national action plan and so on. So I have to remind them. So we have already CEDAW. So this supposed to be as the legal framework to, establish more implemented policy rather than to abandon CEDAW. So there are a tendency not to looking at CEDAW. There are a tendency not to use CEDAW as a framework because they said, oh, this is something westernized. It is something that not really, seems that they don't think that they have obligate to implement it. So that's the conditions. Although I said, compared to the other different instruments, human rights that we have ratified, we have actually 9 conventions that we had ratified. The implementations of CEDAW or the mechanism of CEDAW is more dynamic rather than the others convention. It's because of the women's movement are quite strong here in Indonesia. So that is what I say, that national or international policy or instrument cannot be implemented if there is no strong women's movement or society movements that monitor the governments how to implement it. So the monitoring is not only in the level of international, but monitoring also is very important in national level. We are very lucky, Perla. We have National Commission on Violence Against Women. So this is a national body specifically to monitor the government's body also with regard to the implementation on women's rights. So this National Commission is very effective as well to monitor. They have a database of the human rights violations occurred to women. So this is one of the, what do you call that? The middle ground, international, local, so that we have national monitoring mechanism as well. So I think this is quite unique in Indonesia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't realize that this is already 90 minutes. Thank you so much. I think everyone will agree with me that all the 3 excellent speakers have shared their knowledge, their experience, and also their live experience in working around CEDAW. And I think everyone in this forum also agree that there are still a lot of work that we need to do. I thought everything is fine in Australia, but actually it is not. So I hope it's also this can be seen as a to give encouragement for Indonesian colleagues that even in a country considered to be developed and then that human rights are well protected, but in fact violence against women is still a big issue, serious issues. Violence against people with disabilities, it's also largely unaddressed, and so that means we still all needs to still work together. So probably I can ask all the 3 speakers just to give no more than 1 minute. What's your final thought based on our discussion today? Maybe we can start from Dr. Perla.
Thank you, Dina. Well, it's just a confirmation that more needs to be done. That it's Dr. Sri mentioned it. It should be the government saying let's this is CEDAW. What can we do with it? Let's work together. But it's actually NGOs who are doing the job. So supporting more the work of NGOs, joining and or finding a way to support NGOs by providing information, or like even helping draft things. A lot of the issues of NGOs is lack of personnel for that, the lack of budget, etc. So all of those type of volunteering jobs can help to raise the voices and present more shadow reports before CEDAW, and that might actually help improve the circumstances of women in our respective countries. Thank you.
Okay, Ibu Rena?
So I think it's time for academics and also NGOs to hand in hand in the process of writing the report, because we still have problem with the data, the national data, the quantitative data. So, and then the university, the study center, they have a lot of data, they have a lot of research. So how can we access the research? How we can use the data from your research to our report? So that's why we need to have a dialogue between academics and also NGOs and our activists to have maybe like agreement on some certain issues that very important to be highlighted, and then the data which can contribute or support for the report. So that's all, Mbak Dina.
Thank you so much, Ibu Rena. Ibu Sri?
Yeah, I think I agree with Perla and Rena. I think it is a time for us to utilize the CEDAW mechanism more and more effective. And I know that NGOs has worked a lot of effort and then a very good job, yeah. And I think that's not enough. This is need to be spread. This need to be wider with more researcher, more academicians in order to support how the way to monitor Indonesians or other countries' governments to implement CEDAW. And I think we have more and more interactions working together. I think Bu Rena is correct. Even in Universitas Gadjah Mada, we are one of the highest in the survey, national survey. They said that UGM is one of the highest ranked universities in 3 years, yeah, in producing research on gender. So I think why don't we utilize this? We have a library that put all the research on women's in very different aspect, and then we can collaborate more with a CEDAW working group initiative or others, a university like a Catholic university as well, to strengthen the network between NGOs and academicians in collaboration with monitoring the implementations of CEDAW in international and also national level. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it's a very excellent point to wrap up our first international webinar between Thomas More Law School and the Faculty of Law of Gadjah Mada University. I think we end on a very high note that collaboration like this, where university academics and NGO activists like Ibu Rena and colleagues here are coming together, and then consistent with the last International Women's Days, accelerate action. So I hope that we can continue this collaboration, yeah, Mbak I and Ibu Perla and also Mbak Rena. And I think the challenge for all of us women are not getting easier, it's getting more serious. Yeah, I think everywhere in the world, if we have witnessed in the last couple of months, far right movements, they are all wants to diminish and to eradicate our very basic human rights. So it's not just a problem in Indonesia, it's a problem with us in Australia and everywhere else in the world. So thank you so much, Ibu Dr. Sri Wiyanti and teams. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Dr. Perla, Ibu Dr. Rena, Herdiyani as well. Thank you for, I know you're very busy with a lot of work, but you still take the time to be with us. And I hope that we can continue working together. And for everyone who is watching and listening, thank you. And hopefully this is something that is very helpful and inspiring for our work. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, everyone.
Sorry. I forgot to mention that I should also be grateful and thankful to Mbak Ragil dan Mbak Fai, our sign language interpreters. Thank you so much for your help and making this event more inclusive so that our colleagues can access what we've discussed today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bu Dina. And I think we have now reached the end of our insightful and thoughtful discussion. I would like to extend my gratitude to you, Bu Dina, Ibu Dr. Dina Afrianty, for excellency moderating today's discussion. A special thank you as well to our distinguished speaker, Ibu Dr. Sri Wiyanti Eddyono, Dr. Perla Guarneros, and Ibu Rena Herdiyani. We also extend our appreciation to all participants who have joined us today. Our appreciation also to our friend from Juru Bahasa Isyarat for helping make this discussion more inclusive. I think this discussion have provided us with a comprehensive and contextualized analysis of CEDAW's impact and implementation in different socio-political settings. Today's discussion has been a diverse and inclusive exchange of knowledge, offering valuable insights into the challenges and opportunities in advancing CEDAW's objective. And before we officially close, I would like to invite everyone for a group photo session. So please kindly turn on your camera so we can take a picture together. I think I will give you about 10 seconds to prepare.
It is very Indonesian culture. Photo is very important for us.
I've been telling Dina that there are no many differences between Mexican and Indonesian culture. I found so many similarities.
That's great. We love it.
Okay, I think everyone is set up. I will start from the first slide. I will count from 1, 2, and 3. And for the second slide, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much, everyone. But I also would like to remind to you to fill the attendance and evaluation form. You can find the link in the comment section, and you also can access today's presentation. You can find also in the comment section. Lastly, we apologize for any shortcomings during this event. We hope to see you again in future discussion as we continue to uphold and strengthen the values of human rights, law, gender, and society. With that, I, Ruchi Raditya, would like to take my leave. Thank you and see you on the next time. Goodbye.
Thank you,
I also included the
Ruchi.
link to my